Hello, my name is Aaron, and today I'm going to talk about the use of invertebrates in human food. Invertebrates have a long history of being used as food. For as long as humans have been around, we've been eating them one way or another. Early humans likely had a diet similar to modern chimpanzees, which include insects and other terrestrial arthropods. Even today, many arthropods and mollusks are commonly eaten in cuisine from all parts of the world. Examples you may be familiar with include shrimp, crab, lobster, scallops, clams, and escargot. In addition, a wide variety of insects and arachnids are also eaten around the world. Grasshoppers, spiders, silkworms, wasps, and various grub-like insect larvae are all eaten in various Eastern Asian countries. The only other phylum that is commonly known to be a food source is echinoderms. Sea stars, sea cucumbers, and especially sea urchins are eaten in China, Japan, and some Mediterranean countries, usually favoring the gonads as the part that is actually eaten. These, of course, are not the only phyla of invertebrates that are eaten by humans. Protochordate sea squirts are eaten in various countries, including Korea, Japan, France, Italy, Greece, and Chile. It is prepared by removing the visceral mass from the outer tunic and thoroughly cleaning it to remove impurities collected from their filter feeding, then served either raw or stir-fried. Another group is echiurine annelid worms, also known as fat innkeeper worms or penis worms, because, well, I'm sure you'll figure out why. They are eaten primarily in Korea, where they are once again either eaten raw, and sometimes still twitching, or stir-fried. One last obscure phyla that is eaten are brachiopods, which are eaten in Eastern Asian countries like Thailand and Indonesia, usually cooked and seasoned with curry. So why do we care? What's the big deal about invertebrates as a food source? Well, while many of the more obscure marine invertebrates will likely stay in the realm of regional delicacies due to the impracticality of serving them anywhere not close to an ocean, insects are in a very different situation. In Chapter 18 of the book, Mass Production of Beneficial Organisms, Marianne Shockley and Aaron Dossi make the case for insects as a part of the human diet. Nutritionally, insects have high levels of protein, comparable to beef or milk, healthy unsaturated fats, similar to fish and poultry, and are rich in other vitamins, minerals, and other valuable nutrients. The biggest benefit, however, is insects' ability to be raised agriculturally using much fewer resources than any livestock. They also can be raised on smaller plots of land and in a wide variety of habitats. All of this results in insects being a highly sustainable, efficient, and low environmental footprint source of human nutrition. The only reason insects have not become a more mainstream source of food is that there exist taboos against the consumption of insects in many Western countries. But I don't just want to talk about eating invertebrates in the abstract sense. So, welcome to my kitchen, where I'll be showing you how to prepare a few examples of what I've been talking about. First, let's start with a pretty simple appetizer, escargot. I was only able to find canned snails, so that's what we'll be working with. One question you might have is, what part of the animal are you actually eating when you eat these snails? In this case, it looks like the entire soft body of the snail is to be served, including all of its visceral mass. Yum. So which species of snails are these? Well, I looked up the source of this brand, and they were imported from Indonesia, meaning they are most likely Achaena fulica, or some other species in the same genus. Apparently, to be considered true escargot, the snails must be from family Helicidae, which these aren't. So, I guess this is technically just going to end up being snails in hot butter sauce. Anyways, since the canned snails are already cooked, all we need to do is make our butter sauce. So in a food processor, you're going to add 6 tablespoons of butter, along with 1 to 3 cloves of garlic, a teaspoon of parsley, a splash of cognac, plus a hefty pinch of kosher salt and some freshly ground black pepper. Process until a semi-smooth paste forms. Now, I thought that the shells of these snails would be included in their can, since that's what escargot is usually served from, but they weren't. In the absence of their shells, I guess I'll just use a muffin tray to melt the butter sauce over them. I put 2 snails in each cup and smeared a healthy tablespoon of the sauce over the top of each pair. Toss them into an oven preheated to 400 degrees for 6 to 8 minutes, just until the butter starts bubbling. Then take them out, and we are ready to plate up and serve. So, how do they taste? Well, they're not nearly as chewy as I was expecting, and the snails themselves have a nice, subtle, earthy flavor to them, which is complemented very well by the richness of the butter sauce. Definitely better than I was expecting overall. Now that we've gotten an appetizer out of the way, it's time for the main course. A dish that's going to feature 4 invertebrates at once: seafood gumbo. We'll start with our shrimp. I was able to find some whole head-on white shrimp, Lithopenaeus setiferus. Something you may not have thought about is the fact that when we eat shrimp, all we're eating is their tail. We're going to start by cutting off their cephalothorax, but we're going to hold on to them since we can use them along with their shells to make a great shrimp stock that we can use as the liquid base for our gumbo. After removing the heads, we need to peel and devein the shrimp, which is actually the removal of their digestive tract, not their veins. Once that's done, we need to get our shrimp stock on the stove. I took all the heads and shells of the shrimp and put them in a pot with a bit of olive oil. I then cooked them on medium heat for just a few minutes until they start to take on some color. Then add 5 cups of water, bring that mixture to a boil, and then lower the heat to simmer for about 20 minutes. Once that's done, we'll pour everything through a fine mesh sieve to separate all those shrimp parts. And there you go, a delicious, flavorful shrimp broth ready to use in our gumbo. Now, let's talk about our other invertebrates we're going to be using, starting with some mussels. These are green shell mussels from New Zealand, Perna caniculus. Now, these have been heat treated at their harvesting facility, so they're already partially cooked, which is why the mantle of the mussel has pulled away from the inside of the shell. Normally, the mantle would coat the inner surface while the animal is alive. And this is another case where the part that we eat is simply the entire soft body of the animal. So we don't need to do any further preparation, since these have already had one shell removed. The next thing we're going to discuss are scallops. These scallops are from off the coast of New Jersey, meaning they are almost certainly Placopecten magellanicus, the Atlantic sea scallop. Though scallops and mussels are both bivalves, the way we eat each of them is very different. Scallops have a large central adductor muscle that they can use to rapidly open and close their shells in order to propel themselves through the water column, and it is this adductor muscle that is primarily eaten by humans. Finally, it's time to talk squid. These squid I have are wild-caught off the coast of Thailand, meaning they are probably Loligo duvacelli, the Indian squid. These have been pre-cleaned by the packaging company for us, and oh, look at that! The arms have been tucked inside the mantle, which means we can make a little reconstruction of a squid here. How cute? Anyways, typically it's just the inner layer of the mantle along with the arms and tentacles. Yes, they're different things. The tentacles are the 2 longer ones, while the arms are the 8 shorter ones, that are eaten by humans, with the internal organs being discarded along with the outer skin and fins. Now we just need to cut the scallops and squid into bite-sized pieces, and then all of our invertebrates are all set. Time to start the brown roux that will be the main thickening agent for our gumbo. We'll start by heating a half cup of vegetable oil over medium heat. Then we'll add an equal amount of flour and stir constantly. Do not walk away at this step. I also specifically chose this wooden utensil as its shape makes it easy to get into the corners of this pot. Keep stirring until the roux reaches a color resembling dark chocolate. Then it's time to add our vegetables. Whoops, I forgot to turn my camera on when the veggies went in. I added 4 stalks of celery, 2 small green bell peppers, and 1 medium yellow onion, all diced ahead of time, along with 3 to 5 cloves of garlic, finely minced. Cook in the roux for a few minutes until the vegetables begin to soften. Then slowly add our shrimp stock from before while constantly stirring to avoid lumpy gumbo as our end product. Once that's done, we need to season our gumbo. I added 2 bay leaves, some smoked paprika, some cayenne pepper, some freshly ground black pepper, and some pre-mixed Cajun seasoning. Now we can set our mixture to simmer on the back burner for at least 45 minutes, preferably closer to an hour, stirring occasionally. When the gumbo has about 10 minutes left to go, we're going to start preparing our invertebrates. A quick note first. A lot of these animals we're cooking with have a tendency to get very tough and chewy if overcooked, so I decided to cook them individually before adding to the gumbo at the very end of its simmer. First, I set the mussels into a steamer and put them on to steam for 3 minutes. That's all they need. I added the shrimp and scallops to an oiled pan preheated over medium-high heat and cooked them for about 3 to 4 minutes, depending on the size of your shrimp and scallops. And finally, I cooked the squid in the pan after I removed the shrimp and scallops, and they only need to cook for about 30 seconds before being removed from the pan. A lot of experiences with extremely tough, rubbery squid are due to the meat being cooked to death. This should leave them with a nice texture that won't stand out too much in our final product. Now, all we need to do is remove the cooked mussels from their shells and cut them in half so they're not quite so big. Then we're ready to dump everything together into the final pot, killing the heat shortly after adding our invertebrates. Let it all sit for a few minutes to give the flavors a chance to get to know each other, then we're ready to plate up. I started with a cup of rice, prepared however you like to cook rice. I used a rice cooker. Then I spooned a healthy amount of gumbo around the sides of it. So, how does it taste? The mussels ended up being the chewiest part of the whole mix, which was surprising to me, with the most standout borderline fishy flavor as well. The squid ended up being nice and tender, with a mild flavor, meaning it didn't really stand out in the final product at all. The scallops were wonderfully buttery and fell apart in your mouth. The shrimp were also very good, with their flavor permeating the entire gumbo. Overall, I may have gone a little too heavy on the cayenne pepper, but it was still very tasty and was the very definition of comfort food. Thanks for stopping by on this overview of invertebrates in human cuisine.